Something about this situation doesn't feel normal. Not the headlines, not the rumors, not even the names being mentioned. It's the energy behind it. The quiet urgency, the sudden phone calls, the way certain people are moving without ever stepping in front of a camera. That's usually the first sign that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. Because when celebrity gossip is harmless, it's loud, it's messy, it leaks everywhere. But when it gets quiet, when conversations shift to private calls and legal pressure instead of public denials, that's when people start paying attention. And right now, attention is locked in. What set this off wasn't a lawsuit or a documentary clip going viral. It was a voice, calm, confident, and completely unafraid, saying something that made the internet stop scrolling. Stop having people call me. You can call me yourself. That line alone changed the tone of the entire conversation, because that's not the language of someone scrambling. That's not panic. That's not clout chasing. That's confrontation. And confrontation only happens when someone believes they're holding leverage. Jason Lee didn't whisper. He didn't hint. He didn't backtrack. He spoke directly. And the response, or lack of one, is what made this explode. Because here's the part people can't stop circling back to. If there was nothing to worry about, why would anyone be calling him at all? That question has become the center of this story. There have been no official statements, no lawsuits filed, no public denials, just silence. And in celebrity culture, silence is never neutral. Sometimes silence is confidence, sometimes it's strategy, but sometimes silence is preparation. What makes this moment different is timing. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening while the industry is already shaking. While names that were once untouchable are suddenly being discussed openly. While documentaries are reopening conversations people thought were buried for good. And that's when Beyoncé's name starts hovering, not as an accusation, but as proximity, presence, history. She's not being dragged, she's not being named outright, but she's not invisible either. And that matters, because Beyoncé isn't just an artist. She's a global institution. Every move is deliberate. Every silence is calculated. Every response, or lack of one, is intentional. So when reports suggest her team may have reached out privately, the internet didn't see it as damage control. They saw it as risk assessment, because ignoring noise is easy. Managing potential fallout is not. And what makes this even more compelling is that nothing has actually been released. No recordings, no documents, no leaks. Just the suggestion that something exists, and the reaction to that suggestion. That's the part that feels different. When pressure appears before evidence, people start asking why. At the same time, Jay-Z is publicly pushing back against allegations in court, framing them as extortion attempts. His legal posture is aggressive, controlled, strategic, which means anything near that situation becomes sensitive by default. And yet, here we are, a podcast host refusing to be quiet, industry insiders watching closely, fans connecting dots, not accusing, just noticing, because patterns don't require proof to feel unsettling. And silence doesn't feel like calm when movement is happening behind closed doors. That's what keeps people watching. Because this story isn't being driven by headlines, it's being driven by reactions. And reactions tell you where the pressure really is. Once money enters the conversation, everything changes. Because at this level, reputation isn't just image, it's infrastructure, it's contracts, it's leverage, it's the reason people get paid. And Beyoncé isn't just a celebrity, she's a business ecosystem. A tour isn't just a tour, it's venues, sponsors, insurance, brand partners, promo runs, streaming tie-ins, licensing, merch, and global media moments that are planned months in advance. So when something threatens that ecosystem, even indirectly, the reaction is never emotional, it's strategic. That's why the internet isn't just watching the headlines, they're watching the movement. Who's speaking? Who's silent? Who suddenly looks nervous? Who starts handling things privately? Because in this industry, quiet action usually means one thing: Risk assessment is happening behind the scenes. And this is where the Jason Lee situation starts feeling heavier than the average gossip cycle. Not because everything he's implying is proven, not because the public has evidence, but because of a simple rule. If someone is truly irrelevant, you ignore them. You don't call. You don't ask. You don't pressure. You let the internet tire itself out. That's why people are stuck on the idea that calls were made, because the very existence of behind-the-scenes outreach changes how the public reads the story. It creates a new question that's hard to shake. If nothing is coming, why does anyone care enough to intervene? And that's not even the only layer, because this moment isn't happening in a calm era. It's happening in a very specific climate, one where the entertainment industry is already on edge. Right now, people are watching documentaries with a different mindset. They're reading lawsuits like they're timelines. They're pulling old clips back into the light. They're asking who was in the room, who was protected, and who was left to take the fall. And once that door opens, it rarely closes.
Simply a civil complaint. And in a civil complaint, it goes through the technical legal process. Now, the distinction, Jessica, between civil and criminal, of course, is that civil is for monetary damages, right? The system can only reward you with money. There's allegations that this 13-year-old is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, suffered depression, etc. So now you go to fact.
That's why silence feels louder than usual. Beyoncé has not addressed anything. Jay-Z's team has been publicly defensive in other contexts, but this moment is different because the conversation online is shifting from rumors to patterns. And patterns are hard to shut down because you can't sue people for questions. You can't erase curiosity. You can't control what viewers notice when silence doesn't match the situation. This is where the stakes feel high, not because something is proven, but because the brand is built on control. Beyoncé's entire public identity is precision. No messy interviews, no uncontrolled spirals, no random live rants, no chaotic back and forths. Every era is curated, every statement is positioned, every appearance is purposeful. So when the public senses private scrambling, it hits harder because it doesn't match the brand. And that mismatch is what triggers suspicion in celebrity culture. Not facts, not documents. Mismatch. Now let's talk about what people don't like to admit. Corporations don't wait. When a controversy touches a big name, brands don't sit around saying, let's see how this turns out. They start quietly preparing exit plans. Because companies don't move based on truth. They move based on risk. And risk is measured in headlines, public sentiment, and potential association. That's why rumors can do real damage even when they aren't confirmed. Not because the rumors are true, but because business doesn't care about nuance. If a brand thinks controversy might stick, it becomes expensive to stay close. That's the cold part of the game. And Beyoncé's business is built on long-term value. Her catalog is value, her touring is value, her partnerships are value, her cultural position is value. So the idea that any part of this could become a serious, ongoing narrative is what would make teams hyper alert. Now add another layer. Jay-Z's situation. Anytime a major public figure is fighting legal battles or public allegations, regardless of outcomes, the public becomes more sensitive to everything around them. Even unrelated stories start being pulled into the same orbit. And that's why this moment feels like a pressure cooker, because in the public's mind, everything is connected. The internet doesn't separate topics cleanly. It merges them into one giant narrative about power and protection. And once that happens, it's very hard to put the story back in the box. That's also why people are rewatching old clips with new eyes, not as evidence, but as cultural memory. They look at old parties, old relationships, old public appearances, and they start asking the question people avoided for years. How did so much happen in plain sight without anyone saying anything? Whether that question is fair or not, it's happening, and that's why this story has legs. Because it fits the moment. A podcast host refusing to be quiet, a couple whose brand is control. An industry already under suspicion, a public that doesn't trust silence anymore. That combination is powerful. Now here's the part that makes this story feel like a slow burn thriller. Nothing has actually dropped. No proof, no leaked file, no confirmed audio, no released recording, just the suggestion that something exists. And the reaction to that suggestion. That's why people are glued. Because if the story were fake, it would be easy to dismiss. But when it feels like somebody is trying to manage it quietly, the audience starts thinking they're trying to stop something. And in gossip culture, once that thought lands, it becomes unstoppable. That's why this moment isn't about what Jason Lee has. It's about what people think he might have, and what that implies about how the industry really works. Because if a podcast host can trigger private outreach just by talking, that tells you the system is fragile. And the fragility is what people smell. The public isn't watching for a denial anymore. They're watching for a crack, a misstep, a rushed statement, a sudden cancellation, a quiet delay, because those are the signs that something behind the curtain is shifting. And if you want the honest truth, the reason this is so intense isn't because people want Beyoncé to fall. It's because people want to know whether untouchable really exists. Because if the most protected names can be pulled into public questioning, it changes how everyone views power. And that's what this moment is really testing. What makes this entire situation so unsettling isn't just one podcast, one lawsuit, or one documentary. It's the pattern. When stories start overlapping, when timelines begin to line up, and when the same names keep surfacing in completely separate contexts, people naturally start asking questions. Not because they want drama, but because silence at this level feels louder than denial. Right now, the industry is watching very carefully. No one is rushing to speak. No one is volunteering clarity. And historically, when that happens, it's usually because the stakes are high, very high. This isn't the kind of moment where a simple statement fixes everything. This is the kind of moment where teams retreat, lawyers take over, and decisions get made behind closed doors. And that's what makes the public reaction so intense. When major figures stay quiet while smaller voices keep talking, it flips the usual power dynamic. Suddenly, the narrative isn't being controlled from the top. It's being shaped in real time by speculation, leaked context, and unanswered questions. Whether those questions ever get resolved publicly or not, the damage to perception has already started. Another key detail people keep circling back to is timing. These conversations didn't start randomly. They're happening while legal cases are unfolding, documentaries are being released, and long-standing relationships are being re-examined under a new lens. That matters. Context always matters. When pressure builds from multiple directions at once, even the most carefully managed images can start to crack. And this is where the industry gets uncomfortable. Because once a narrative reaches this stage, it's no longer about one person. It becomes about systems, about how power works, about who gets protected, who gets questioned, and who gets erased from the story entirely. Viewers aren't just watching celebrities anymore. They're watching how institutions respond. What happens next could go in several directions. Maybe nothing new comes out. Maybe this all fades into background noise, or maybe, just maybe, more information surfaces, and the conversation shifts again. That's the part no one can predict. But history has shown us that once these discussions start, they rarely stop cleanly. And here's the most important takeaway. Curiosity doesn't mean guilt, and discussion doesn't equal conviction. Asking questions is not the same as making claims. But pretending people aren't paying attention anymore, that would be a mistake. Because right now, audiences are more aware, more skeptical, and more engaged than ever before. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about understanding why certain stories feel incomplete, and why so many people sense there's more beneath the surface. And trust me, if anything else develops, if anything changes, or if more context comes to light, you already know we'll be breaking it down right here. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, share it with someone who's been following this story, and subscribe to I Love Gossip so you don't miss what comes next.
And then
because
there is
in
the
this
catalog.
industry, the quiet
Beyoncé's
moments are
back
usually
catalog
the
is
most revealing.